Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, how are you today? I hope you are doing well. Okay, in this meeting, we will discuss about psycholinguistics. But before that, let me introduce our group member. We are from 7th group. Our group consists of me, Nila, Almer Fikian, Fitrati Zakiyah, Muhammad Roziqin, and Amalia Filda Damayanti. And the material of today is psycholinguistics. The first is Introduction of Psycholinguistics. Etymologically, the term psycholinguistic comes from two words, namely psychology and linguistics. In general, psychology is often defined as the study of human behavior by examining the nature of the stimulus, the nature of the response, and the nature of thought process before the stimulus or response occur. Today's psychologists tend to think of psychology as a science that examines the human thought process and all its manifestations that govern human behavior. The purpose of studying the thought process is to understand, explain, and predict human behavior. Psycholinguistics is a science that describes the psychological process that occurs when a person produces sentence and understands the sentence he hears when communicating, and how humans acquire language skill. This is from Simanjuntak at 1987. 1984 explained that limits psycholinguistics as the study of language and thought. Psycholinguistics is a field of study that connects psychology with linguistics. The main goal of a psycholinguistic is to discover the structure and process that underlie the human ability to speak and understand language. Psycholinguistics are not interested in language interaction among language speakers. What they do primarily is explore what happens when individuals speak. And for the next will be delivered by my friend.
Well, branch of psycholinguistics. Here, there are 7 psycholinguistics. First, theoretical psycholinguistics. Second is development psycholinguistics. The third is social psycholinguistics. Next, educational psycholinguistics, neuropsycholinguistics. Next, experimental psycholinguistics, and the last is applied psycholinguistics. Theoretical psycholinguistics, its mean examines matters relating to language theory. For example, about the nature of language, the characteristics of human language, competence and performance theory, or language and parallel theory. Next, development psycholinguistics. Development psycholinguistics talks about language acquisitions. For example, talking about language acquisitions theory, about first and second language acquisitions, language acquisition device, critical periods of language acquisitions, and others. Social psycholinguistics. Social psycholinguistics is often also referred to as psychosociallinguistics, talking about social aspects of language. For example, language attitudes, culture acculturations, culture shock, social distance, culture critical periods, language exposure, education, length of education, and others. Next, educational psycholinguistics. Educational psycholinguistics talks about aspects of education in general in schools, especially regarding the role of language in language teaching in general, especially in teaching reading, communication skills, oratory skills, and knowledge of language improvement to improving the process of conveying ideas. Neuropsycholinguistics. Neuropsycholinguistics talks about the relationships of language to the human brain. For example, which side of the brain is related to language skills, what nerves are damaged when a person has broadcast aphasia, and which nerves are damaged with Wernicke's aphasia. Is the language really lateralized? When these lateralizations occur, is the critical period really related to the flexibility of the nerves of the brain? Next, experimental psycholinguistics. Experimental psycholinguistics talks about experiments in all fields involving language and language behavior. Analyze is applied psycholinguistics. Applied psycholinguistics talks about applying the findings of the 6 disciplines of psycholinguistics above to specific fields, such as psychology, linguistics, speaking and listening, education, language teaching and learning, teaching reading, neurology, psychiatry, communication, literature, and etc.
Okay, I will be continue the material about development and aspect of psycholinguistics. Psycholinguistic theory radically underwent at least 5 changes in direction after being independent as a separate discipline in the 1950s. The 1981. The changes can be summarized as follows. Period 1. During the 50s, psycholinguistic theory was influenced by the view of behavioristic theories such as those developed by Skinner and structural taxonomic theories such as those developed by Bloomfield. Period 2. During the 1960s and early 70s, the mentalistic cognitivist view of transformationalists such as Chomsky dominate all aspects of psycholinguistics. Period 3. Changes in pressure in this period led to communist pragmatism. The aspect of language in transformational theory circle still deeply influenced the psycholinguistic theory and also second language teaching in the 70s. Period 4. At the end of the last decade, pragmatist or sociolinguistic view became the mainstream in this period. Period 5. In recent years, an integrative model has been proposed which consists of behavioral and cognitive components as well as personality traits. At the beginning of the 20th century, Ferdinand de Saussure 1964, a Swiss linguist, had tried to explain what language really is and how language is in the brain, or psychology. He introduced important concepts which he called language, parole or spoken, and language or speech. The Saussure asserted that the object of linguistic study is language, while parole is the object of psychological study. This means that if we want to study language thoroughly and carefully, we should combine the two disciplines because basically everything that exists in the language is psychological.
Okay, next, mental grammar. Mental grammar is the generative grammar stored in the brain that allows a speaker to produce language that other speakers can understand. It is also known as competence grammar and linguistic competence. It contrasts with linguistic performance, which is the correctness of actual language used according to a language prescribed rules. The concept of mental grammar was popularized by American linguist Noam Chomsky in his groundbreaking work, Syntactic Structures. Philip Pinder and Kanye Smith note in the language phenomenon how important Chomsky's work was. This focus on grammar as a mental entity allowed enormous progress to be made in characterizing the structure of language. relate to this work is universal grammar, or the predisposition for the brain to learn the complexities of grammar from an early age, without being implicitly taught all the rules. The study of how the brain actually does this is called neurolinguistics.
Okay, the last topic is about objects and scopes of psycholinguistics. Based on the limitation and process of psycholinguistic development, it is rather difficult to determine the scope of psycholinguistics. Even if we look at the topics discussed at the conference in Mons, Belgium in September 1980, it will be more difficult to define the scope of psycholinguistics. However, by trying to analyze the object of linguistics and psychology and the focus of psycholinguistic studies, it can be concluded that the scope of psycholinguistics tries to describe language from psychological aspect and as far as human ideas can go. That is why the important topics that become the scope of psycholinguistics are language process in communication and thought, language acquisitions, patterns of language behavior, verbal associations and meaning problems, language process in abnormal people such as deaf children, speech, perception, and cognition. Psycholinguistics can be related to performance as the embodiment of language rules. For this purpose, psycholinguistics is tasked with assess the psychological reality of linguistic descriptions of competence, determine the factors that influence linguistic performance, and provide a limit to the nature of this influence. The role of psycholinguistics in language teaching is not only related to language acquisition, but also to the interest of learning a first, second language and learning a foreign language. Today, the educate not only learn one language, say their mother tongue, but with the existence of human relationships, the educate must be taught a language that is not their mother tongue. To study this language, a combination of linguistic theory and psychology is needed, which is transformed into a subdiscipline of linguistics called psycholinguistics. Here we see that psycholinguistics is an applied science in the application of linguistic theory, and the application of psychological theory for practical purpose. The application of psycholinguistics for such practical purpose gave birth to science called applied psycholinguistics. With the presence of applied psycholinguistics, the language acquisition process is more revealed and language teaching any more fulfilling expectation, namely that educated people can use the language learned in not too long time. I think that's all of our presentation. I hope it is useful for you all. I'm sorry for any words or behavior that unpleasing you heard. Thank you very much for the occasion and your kind attention. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.